Hello and welcome to instalment 3 of just riding around Goulburn, heading west of Goulburn. I'm on a road called the Woodhouse Lee Road at the moment, going west of Goulburn towards Crookall with no particular destination, just riding around. And today I'm going to talk about some things that seem to occupy the minds of some in the motorcycling community to the point where they seem to become somewhat obsessed about them, and in my view they're things that don't really matter all that much. The first of those things that seems to occupy the mind of some, not all, but some people in the motorcycling community, is whether a machine that has 3 wheels, whether it be 1 wheel at the front or 2 wheels at the front, 2 wheels at the front that are close together, like on a Tekken or a Piaggio MP3, or further apart like on a Riker or a Spider, some in the motorcycle community seem to be obsessed with whether in fact those machines are motorcycles. Now I can only talk about Australia's experience because that's where I live, and as far as Australia is concerned, all of those machines, whether they have 2 wheels at the front, 2 wheels wide apart at the front like a Spider or a Riker, 1 wheel at the front like a traditional trike or a Harley Tri-Glide, they're all considered to be motorcycles for the purposes of licensing, for the purposes of registration, for the purposes of insurance. They're all considered to be motorcycles. And so, worrying about how many wheels a person has and how those wheels are configured seems to me to be relatively unimportant in the grand scheme of things for motorcycling. Most important things to me in motorcycling are you enjoying it? As Coach Bob, who lives in Florida, says, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And if you're obsessing about how many wheels somebody else has on their motorcycle, then you're probably not having as much fun as you ought to be. I recognise that some of that obsession is just good-natured banter between various people, but there are some in the motorcycle community who just seem to look down their nose and think, well, if you've got 3 wheels, then you're not really a motorcyclist, without really knowing any of the reasons why people might ride a motorcycle with 3 wheels. A second question that seems to occupy the minds of some in the motorcycle community a lot, and this is one that comes up frequently and seems to bring a lot of angst and discussion with it, is, are scooters really motorcycles? Well, again, for the purposes of registration, licensing, insurance, they are motorcycles. You have to have a motorcycle licence to ride them, and no matter the size of the scooter that you want to ride, you have to take a safety course, or a stay upright course as it's called, before you can get your licence. And there are scooters that would not be learner legal. They're not part of the learner approved motorcycle scheme. One of those would be the Aprilia 850. I realise probably not very many of those are sold in Australia, but that's not the point. The point is that the fact that some scooters are not learner legal. The bigger maxi scooters like the Suzuki Bergman 650, which is sadly no longer made, the BMW 650s, which I think are also not made any longer, the Yamaha T-Max 550 and the Kymco 550, they're all learner legal, but they're maxi scooters and they're not intended to be the sort of scooter that you would buy so you could do food delivery or something like that. They're designed so that they can be taken out on the highway and be ridden like any other touring bike. And as a person who owns a Suzuki Bergman, I can assure you that the Suzuki Bergman 650 can hold its own on the motorways, freeways, whatever you call it, the open road, as well as any other touring bike or cruiser or sports bike or whatever. A third thing that seems to occupy the mind, and I didn't realise this was a problem or an issue that people were thinking about and worrying about and being concerned about, was whether motorcycles that have either automatic or semi-automatic transmissions are in fact real motorcycles, and whether the people who ride them are real motorcyclists or some sort of lower version. Now, my experience is this: I have owned cruisers, I have owned scooters, 2 Suzuki Bergman 650s, and I currently own a Spider. And the Spider has a semi-automatic transmission. By semi-automatic I mean you have to physically change up from first to second and so on using a paddle on where your left thumb is on the switchgear. But if you want to change down, you simply close off the throttle and the bike will change down by itself. The bike systems detect that you're slowing down, and it will change down by itself. And if you put your foot on the brake, it will detect that you're slowing down and will change down automatically, and will also rev match for you. Now, the Suzuki Bergmans that I have owned, and I also owned at one stage, and I don't say all this to boast, I'm just saying it because I want you to know that I've had a few bikes and I do know a bit about what I'm talking about. I also owned at one stage a Piaggio MP3 400. They all had what's called a constantly variable transmission, or a CVT. I don't pretend to understand the mechanics of how it works, but as best I can understand it, there is a belt and a series of pulleys. And most scooters have that sort of transmissions, often referred to as a twist and go. You get on the bike, twist the throttle, and the bike goes. It's always in gear, and it just sets off. I assume that the reason for that is it's a little less complicated than a transmission and clutch and so on. And because the engine and the driven wheel are closer to each other, because the engine's usually over the driven wheel on a scooter, it's an easier system to make work on a scooter than it is on a bike. The bikes I've owned, I've had a Yamaha XV1100 and a Kawasaki Vulcan Voyager 1700, and both of those are Japanese cruisers, styled after American bikes, but they're Japanese cruisers. They had manual transmissions with a clutch and a heel and toe shifter. And I can tell you that in my experience, the semi-automatic transmission of the Spider and the twist and go transmission of the scooters is easier to operate. I say that because what I mean is when I get on my bike and I go somewhere, I'm on my bike because I want to ride. I want to be out and enjoy the open air and be out in the elements and all that, just like I am at the moment on this ride. And I don't want to be concerned about changing gears and managing the clutch and all that sort of stuff, especially when I'm coming to a roundabout or a stop sign or traffic lights or an intersection where I've got to be sure that somebody else is going to see me and give way to me if I have the right of way and so on. The Kawasaki Vulcan Voyager was a very heavy bike, nearly 400 kilos fully laden. The Yamaha XV1100 wasn't quite as heavy, but nevertheless was a heavy bike. And although they've got a low centre of gravity, they're still heavy bikes. And so when you're coming up to roundabouts, and there are lots of roundabouts in the town where I live, and there are traffic lights and skidway signs and so on, trying to work the clutch, work the brakes, work the throttle, and all those things together while the bike is slowing down and keeping the bike stable and upright and so on. It's not impossible. It's not an unpleasant task, but it can be difficult at times. And if you have to make sudden stops because somebody else hasn't given way to you, or somebody else has failed to see you and assumed that everything's all right, or somebody's run a red light when the green light was in your favour, having to manage all that stuff, the clutch, the brakes, the throttle and so on, can be a bit of a hairy experience. One of the reasons I gave up riding the Kawasaki Vulcan Voyager was because at nearly 400 kilos it was getting a little bit heavy to get off the stand and getting to be less enjoyable to ride around in the town where I lived. Out on the highway it was great fun to ride. It was very enjoyable, it was quite relaxing. You put the cruise control on and you could cruise at 100 k's or 110 k's, whatever it was you wanted to do, and have a very comfortable ride. But getting out onto the open road, around the roundabouts and so on, was not a lot of fun anymore just because the bike was heavy. So the idea of, because a bike has a semi-automatic, as in the Spider, or a dual clutch transmission as the Goldwing does. I mean, if no one seriously in the motorcycle community is going to say that a Goldwing's not a real motorcycle, but it has a dual clutch transmission, or a flappy paddle transmission, as Jeremy Clarkson used to call it when he was on Top Gear, and he came across cars with that sort of transmission. No one's going to say that is less of a motorcycle than a Harley Davidson that has a manual shifter that you've got to get your toe under and shift up into second. The Kawasaki, as I said, the Kawasaki and the Yamaha both had a heel and toe shifter, so you used your toe to shift down into first and used your heel to shift up into second, third, fourth, fifth and sixth and so forth. I noticed the Harleys have done away with that and they just have a shifter you've got to get your toe under. But no one's going to say the Goldwing is less of a motorcycle because it has a dual clutch transmission. Surely no one's going to try and make that argument. So in regards to those three issues, how many wheels does your motorcycle have? Does it have what sort of transmission it has, and whether it's a scooter or a motorcycle, it all seems to me to be a little bit pointless. To me, as I said earlier, as Coach Bob says, I quoted him, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And the thing that's important to me is the ride. It's the fact that I'm out on my bike, going somewhere, enjoying the elements, enjoying all the things that motorcycling has to offer, and I feel I can enjoy them more if I can just twist the throttle and go, and I don't have to worry about changing down on a sharp curve, or am I in the right gear to go around this bend? It's too late to change down now. I can't change my gear at the moment because I'm committed to going around this curve at this particular speed. If the motorcycle will choose that gear for me, then that's one less thing I have to think about, and it makes my ride all the more enjoyable. If you've got some thoughts about those issues, that is, how many wheels does your bike have? Is a scooter less of a motorcycle than a motorcycle? Or is a bike with a CVT or semi-automatic transmission or a dual clutch transmission, is it less of a bike than a traditional motorcycle with a manual transmission and two wheels and so on? Then leave your comment in the appropriate section, and when I become aware of it, I will respond. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your ride, whatever it is you're riding. Ride safely, and I will talk to you when I'm making the next motorcycle video, which will be fairly shortly, I hope. Thank you for watching.